Good Monday morning. Mondays with Mark here at Green Bay Botanical Garden. A little overcast, a little drizzly, but still beautiful day out here at Green Bay Botanical Garden. Before we get into Mondays with Mark, I just wanted to let you know about the extension of our plant sale here. We have some beautiful specimens from our butterfly house exhibit that are going to go probably in the compost pile if anyone doesn't want to buy them, but there's some really great specimens. Our price is now $5 a plant. We have the golden pothos, white pothos, interior plant that can spice up a little greenness as our landscape starts to change through the different autumn colors into wintertime. Get a little piece of the butterfly house and enjoy it all winter long. So please come out here, support Green Bay Botanical Garden. Buy yourself a nice interior plant for only $5. All right, please support Green Bay Botanical Garden. I want to show you the beautiful fall colors out here at the garden. It's actually looking pretty spectacular, and you probably have maybe taken some little journeys throughout the state of Wisconsin. There's that travelwisconsin.gov website that has that fall color report. Really good source of information on where you're planning your travels to know what percentage the fall color's at. So Rachel and I are going to kind of squeak past here and give you a little overlook here because it's pretty gorgeous in our woods. This is the woods behind the amphitheater here at Green Bay Botanical Garden, and it's really looking quite spectacular. Oftentimes it's a yellow color, but this year it has some different colors going on in there. There's some ash trees, there's some box elders. It looks like changing color. We have maybe a few sugar maples even in there, and we do have, Green Bay Botanical Garden has the 23.5 acres of developed gardens, and then 23.5 acres of undeveloped land, and that is part of the undeveloped land that's really quite spectacular. And there is a path system that we mow through there and maintain. It's a little bit uneven some places due to stormwater erosion, but it is something that is visible to get in that color. So I encourage you to come out here and check out some of our other 23.5 acres of kind of natural areas. And the other thing in this fall that we need to do is check out fall blooming plants. Oftentimes we said, remember back in the day, in our nursery, we buy things in the spring, early summer. We don't oftentimes think about fall color and interest in our perennials, especially sometimes. So I want to walk back through here and show you a couple ornamental plants that have some awesome fall color, and then also some kind of native plants and some of the nativars. So this is bugbane, snake root, it's called. Nope, snake plant. Nope, not snake plant. Actaea. This one's pink spike. I'm more familiar with one over here that I want to show everybody. This Atropurpurea is really quite a nice. It has more of a purple color throughout the other parts of the year. Now it's a little greener, but it also has these amazing wands of flowers, and they're really quite sweetly fragrant. And they bloom in the season, so it's an interesting ornamental plant to add to your garden. They also are quite tall and high, so they add a lot of height to your garden. Here we have variegated Solomon seal, and it has that variegated leaf, so it's a little different than the normal Solomon seal, which adds interest throughout the growing season. But you can see on this group it's starting to change color, and as you come over here, you can see it gets this nice clear yellow color. Perennial plant that adds fall color to your garden. So look at some of those things when you're shopping in the springtime and learn about maybe the fall color of a perennial that you can add to your garden. So kind of a cool idea. The other thing I wanted to point out, and Rachel can kind of show you these grasses behind us, this is a cultivar of big blue stem called Red Bull, which was selected down at Intrinsic Perennials in Illinois. And it has this fall color coming that's a little more red than the straight up species of big blue stem. So that's kind of a neat trend in horticulture for fall interest and different characteristics. Those are the nativars. So the big thing we have to make sure is that they have the same wildlife and food habitat value as the straight species. A couple other grasses, I took some samples from the Grand Garden because we didn't have time to walk down there, but this is little blue stem. Prairie dropseed has that more open flower panicle, and that has kind of a like it. Some people don't. Teach their own. And then this is Bouteloua gracilis blonde ambition. It kind of looks like little eyebrows, or it looks like people say they look like little cats hanging on. Really a decorative ornamental grass. So remember the grasses when you're purchasing for their fall interest. A couple other flowers I wanted to share with you. This is the Montrose White Calamint. That one is one that blooms all summer long, June, July, August, now September, even into October. So long season bloomer. It is an ornamental plant, not a native. And then we have some of our summer bloomers like purple coneflower that actually will sporadically flower into fall. This is Rudbeckia Gold Rush, which is a late summer bloomer in the Grand Garden. We have our asters, which are definitely late season bloomers. So think about these. This looks like Aster ericoides, I believe, from the Grand Garden. And then New England aster, which you probably are seeing blooming throughout the landscape and native areas. Can get a little bit leggy, so sometimes it's good to plant some stuff below it or next to it lower to hide the bottom parts of the stems. And then this is a cultivar called October late. So it's called October Skies because it blooms in October, I guess, and it kind of does look like the sky. So it's just interesting because of how late it doesn't start blooming till now. It's just really starting, so it'll be at its full glory in October. And then we have Gay Feather or Liatris, that's still blooming sporadically in the Grand Garden. So some of those guys keep going. And then finally, our last guy to talk about is Goldenrod, which you're probably very familiar with. This one is called Solar Cascade, I believe, which is a cultivar of Solidago. So it has more of a refined, linear bloom, which is kind of nice. And it's a dwarf, so it's very small in the landscape. And remember, the goldenrods aren't the guys that cause us to sneeze. That's ragweed. So don't be afraid to plant this. So that's one thing to think about, adding fall blooming perennials to your garden, especially if you notice now that you have gaps and don't have a lot of color. So think about some of those specimens and go to your local garden center and see what's in bloom still out there. All right, the other thing I want to talk about is one of my favorite topics, all plant bulbs. And apples, don't forget about apples. If you're going out to look at those fall colors, go do some pick your own apples or go support your local apple orchard, get some delicious fruit. It's starting to be ready to go. That's an aside. The real thing is the bulbs. So, a couple of bulbs that I want you to know. Buy them now. Some things are already sold out. There's a lot of great online sources. There's, great nurseries, Stein's Gardens and Gifts, where you can buy some. Animals eating your bulbs. That's a big thing for people. Deer, rabbits, whatever. So tulips are so gorgeous. We love them here at the Botanical Garden, but they are the thing that critters love the most. They'll be digging them up in the fall. They'll be digging them up in the spring after they're done blooming. They'll be eating them in the spring when they first come up. So if you have deer pressure, you probably want to not grow a tulip unless you want to do a lot of extra work, which we can talk briefly about.
So Mark, here at the garden, I've noticed that we tend to have problems with chipmunks. Do they like the same kind of bulbs that deer do?
Yeah, the chipmunks love the tulips as well. Everything that loves the tulips. Why? I don't know. Probably they look delicious. I don't know. I would eat one maybe. But yeah, everything seems to dig up the tulips, and the chipmunks don't. They do eat them, but they also replant them.
Yeah.
So they help design. The deer will preferentially eat on these guys too. So these are the ones to be most aware of that animals will eat. Okay. But if you have that problem, there are a lot of great things like the daffodils, hyacinths, a lot of those miscellaneous bulbs that we briefly mentioned last time, like the pushkinia, the squill, the winter aconite, all those ones are pretty critter resistant. The crocus are another thing that animals seem to love a lot of too. So we don't even plant those here anymore because of how much they get eaten. So a couple interesting things. There are small little miniature daffodils, like this, and then there's big ginormous daffodils, and when they have these extra parts on them, they call that this would be a triple nose daffodil. Why they call it a nose, I'm not sure. I guess it kind of looks like a nose maybe. But those offsets, they call that. So that's when you're getting a bigger, more mature, robust bulb when you have those double and triple nose ones. And remember, the bulbs, the interesting thing is when you dissect them, which you can do yourself or do with a kid, you can see the miniature flower in there already. So the little leaves and flower are already formed in there. So when you plant them, you don't really need to fertilize them. Some places say you should, some say you don't, but you really don't need to because it's all in there. And this part here is the modified leaf tissue, which is going to be all the energy to cause it to grow the next year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's its food. Its food is already in there, and it's already in there, so you don't really have to do anything.
So, Mark, the garden was supposed to get bulbs last week, new bulbs that we haven't dug up. And you mentioned that there's actually an issue with shipments this year being delayed. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing. Rachel was mentioning our delayed bulb shipment. So usually we do get the bulbs a little bit toward the end of September just to have them in-house and feel more safe that we're ready to go whenever the weather is right for us to plant. But this year, because of all of the hurricanes and the hurricanes forming off Africa and coming to the west across the Atlantic, that's actually delayed some of the ships and caused them to have to kind of change their course slightly, which has caused a delay in the shipping of the bulb. So it's just pretty interesting how those changes, in the climate and all those things that we think about are actually now affecting some different things that we really wouldn't have anticipated them affecting. So that's pretty crazy, actually. We'll still get them in time to plant and everything, but it just was kind of fascinating that the increase in hurricanes that we hear about affecting the southeastern United States and the Gulf Coast is actually affecting our bulb shipment way up here in Wisconsin. Kind of crazy. The other crazy anatomy thing, since we're on that topic, I'm not sure, hopefully people find this interesting. This kind of crazy is this hyacinth here. This is forming little offsets at the bottom here. So that's how they would, one way they could reproduce more bulbs to sell us is to knock these little guys off and plant them out and then grow them until they're ready to have a flower. So the kind of funky thing about the bulb, which we saw in this, it has the roots, and this basal plate is actually compressed stem tissue. So those are all the leaves, and then there's a little flower. So here, the compressed stem tissue, like here's a boxwood, those have the axillary buds on the edge of the stem. That's kind of, the axillary bud is where the meristematic tissue is that causes this new little bulb to form. So it's kind of cool because this was just like squished, this stem squished to a flat, almost plane, which is where these guys form off of. So it's just a different way of a plant growing. So anyway, once you figured out what cool plants you want to do and you're over the anatomy side of it, all our bulbs we try to plant about 3 times deep as they are wide. So this guy is only like an inch, so it only would have to be 3 inches-ish deep. Whereas our big guy here, is like 2 inches, so we'd have to, 2 to 3, I guess, so we'd have to go 6 to 9 to 8-ish inches deep on this one, because it's in that 2 to 3 range, maybe 2.5, so we'd go, deeper. So it's a lot more work to plant these bigger ones so you get the bigger flower. And that's why these knives that we use are pretty handy dandy, because they do have a little, measuring system of inches on there. Sometimes it gets worn off at the tip. But it kind of gives you an idea of how deep you need to dig. So when we plant those big ones, we know we have to go to like the hilt of this knife, if not more. But if your soil is really friable, like it is here at the garden, it's pretty easy to dig with this thing. Or if you look online, the websites, color blends, they have soil augers that you can hook up to a drill. And we recommend the hammer drill because it kind of goes up and down and it helps clear the soil. That's the challenge, is sometimes you get rotated in there and it can actually be kind of dangerous. The other thing with the small ones is you can just dig a hole and chuck them in the ground there. So pretend this is the right depth of the hole. You can just sprinkle them in there and throw that on top of there. And then they're good to go. The other thing about the bulbs is you don't have to plant them like this. They'll come up any way you plant them. It's kind of a myth that you have to do that. It makes sense to do it because you don't want air pockets and things around there for the roots to grow and desiccate and dry, but it doesn't matter. Our methodology is we lay our bulbs out. We're pretty meticulous about the spacing because that's how we order them, based on the square footage. And then we dig them into the right depth like we just talked about. We cover them back up. And then what we do is we water them in with a hose and wand and key, because the bulb needs to take moisture and to start growing, to hydrate all its organelles and start growing. So we wanted to start doing that because we wanted to put its roots into the ground, which is what it does in the fall. It roots in there. So we want that to start as soon as we plant it, not wait for rain to happen. And then we put Milorganite on top of there, and we do that not as a fertilizer because we know it doesn't need it. We just do it as an animal deterrent, like Rachel said, to keep all the chipmunks and things, especially from digging them all up in the fall. And then the other thing we do is we put down liquid fence, which is this deer and rabbit deterrent. And we spray it on the ground as another thing to do just to keep the animals away from there.
And they're non-toxic. It's just is it a smell thing where they smell it and they're just like it's unappetizing to them?
Yep. It's like garlic and rotten egg smell. So it doesn't smell that good. So you don't want to get it on yourself, usually, maybe. So we do that every week until the ground freezes, just to keep the animals away, mostly from the tulips. You know, if we're just planting daffodils, we don't do all that stuff. We might just throw the malorganite down for kicks, but we don't then spray the ground if it's a tulip, a hyacinth, or something that's critter resistant. Just the tulips, which we have a lot of. And then pretty much we're good to go. And that's the beauty of the bulbs. It's a lot of work planting them, but then they have that whole flower, and then they're ready for the springtime if we do those couple things of just taking care of them with the liquid fence. So that's what's amazing about them. I mean, annuals, you have to go through a lot of work of planting them in the ground in the summer, but then you have to take care of them all summer long too, by watering them, by deadheading them and all that stuff. So that's kind of what's spectacular about the bulbs. And here at Green Bay Botanical Garden, we have a huge amount of bulbs, like what these 30,000 we're planting this year, which is lower than our normal amount of the 45 to 50,000. We'll have 300,000 spring blooming bulbs in the ground, and that's besides perennials, trees, and shrubs, and all the other things going on. So it's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, display of spring blooming bulbs in the state of Wisconsin. So we encourage you to plant some bulbs at your own house, and then to come out here at Green Bay Botanical Garden in the springtime, which is really peaks around the middle of May, and come and see our display that we'll be working so hard in the fall putting in for you.
So Mark, you're definitely, whenever we talk to anybody on the horticulture team, they're always like, Mark's the spring bulbs guy. If you have questions about spring bulbs or design or anything like that, they always recommend asking you. Why do you like spring blooming bulbs so much compared to some of the other, areas of the garden and things like that?
That's a good question. Why do I love them? I think I love them for a lot of reasons, but I do love that, like in the springtime, it's just like all this color. It's like all at once. And I'm kind of like an all or nothing person, personality wise. So I love that, it's just like this humongous display of things. I also do love the forms of them. Sometimes I call them like the elegant forms of the bulbs and the tulips, especially like lily flowering ones. And I had a professor, Terry Ferris, who, one of her big talks was about the life of the bulb and how that all works. And, she mentioned how that's how she got her job, actually, her teaching job, like her demonstration lecture was on this. So I was kind of strangely felt the connection because of Terry Ferris, who was my mentor at River Falls, or one of my mentors. And I do like I said previously, how you plant them and do a lot of work in the fall, and it's just like waiting for you all winter to enliven you and get you rejuvenated in the springtime, when we've been through such a long winter here in Green Bay and in the northern climates of the U.S. and other spots. It's just like nice to see all that color, and just it makes you happy to see like all that and feel like reinvigorated and enlivened after winter.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, it's a good answer.
Cool. Well, those are some tips here. I kind of got a little long-winded this time. Thank you for listening. Hope that you can check out our website at gbbg.org for more information and tips, and hopefully you get a chance to come out to the garden and visit us and see all the beauty of fall and autumn still here in Green Bay.